The text message that shattered Chloe Lancaster's world arrived at 2:17 p.m. on a Tuesday. Just 3 words. Marcus is hurt. For the 7 months she'd carried his child, her universe had been a symphony of soft pastels, cashmere baby blankets, and the steady, reassuring presence of her husband, the indomitable Marcus Thorne. He was her rock, the architect of their gilded life. Now, rushing to the city's most exclusive private hospital, her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear for the man she loved and the baby nestled safely inside her. She was prepared for anything, for grim-faced doctors, for whispered prognoses, for a long and difficult recovery. The one thing she wasn't prepared for was the truth. The air in the penthouse apartment overlooking the city was always still a carefully curated silence that cost more than most people's homes. Chloe Lancaster, 28 years old and 7 months pregnant, traced the rim of her chamomile tea mug, her gaze lost in the panoramic view of the sprawling metropolis below. From this height, the city looked like a circuit board, intricate and pulsing, with a life she felt increasingly distant from. Her life with Marcus Thorne was by all external measures a fairy tale. He was the charismatic heir to Thorne Industries, a sprawling conglomerate with its fingers in everything from real estate to cutting-edge tech. He was handsome, with a jawline that could cut glass and eyes the color of a stormy sea, that when they smiled, crinkled in a way that made her feel like the only woman in the world. They had met at a charity gala 2 years ago. She was a junior art curator there, with her museum feeling utterly out of place amongst the city's elite. He had approached her, not with the swagger of a man who owned half the room, but with a genuine curiosity about a contemporary sculpture she was admiring. The courtship had been a whirlwind of helicopter rides to private estates in the Hamptons, surprise trips to Paris, and front-row seats at every major fashion week. He'd pursued her with a single-minded intensity that was both flattering and slightly overwhelming. Her friends had been giddy with excitement. Her parents, humble middle-class academics, had been quietly concerned. "He's from a different world," Chloe, her father, had warned, his brow furrowed. "Be careful your feet stay on the ground." She had assured them and herself that Marcus was different. He loved her, for her, not for her pedigree or connections, of which she had none. The Thorne family, particularly its matriarch Genevieve Thorne, had been polite but cool. Genevieve was a woman carved from granite and Chanel tweed, her smile a masterclass in expressing welcome without a shred of warmth. Chloe knew she was seen as an outsider, a pretty but unremarkable addition to the Thorne dynasty, chosen by the Golden Son. The wedding was an affair spoken about in hushed, envious tones for months. And when she became pregnant, it felt like the final piece clicking into place. The succession was secured. Marcus was ecstatic, fussing over her, constantly ensuring she wanted for nothing. He filled the nursery with bespoke furniture and hand-painted murals. He massaged her swollen feet at night and whispered promises of their future, a perfect family portrait. Yet lately, a subtle disquiet had settled into the corners of their perfect life. Marcus was working later, his phone buzzing with urgent work calls at all hours. He'd been traveling more for a crucial merger deal. He was spearheading a high-stakes acquisition of a rival tech firm, Cybercore Innovations. He'd explained it all to her in patient, slightly condescending tones. Synergies, market caps, shareholder value, words that floated around her but never quite landed. He seemed more stressed, his easy smile sometimes looking stretched thin at the edges. When she'd tried to talk to him about it, he'd simply kissed her forehead and said, "Don't you worry your beautiful head about it, darling. I've got it all under control. You just focus on growing our little girl." And she had. She'd focused on prenatal yoga, on choosing names, on the simple, profound magic of feeling the baby kick. She told herself the distance she felt was just the pressure of his work, the natural ebb and flow of a high-powered life. She trusted him, implicitly. The ringing of her phone was a violent intrusion into the afternoon's tranquility. It was Marcus's personal assistant, a young, perpetually flustered man named Peter. "Mrs. Thorne, there's been an incident." His voice was strained. Chloe's blood ran cold. The teacup rattled in its saucer. "Peter, what is it? What's happened?" "It's Mr. Thorne. He was in a car accident. He's been taken to St. Augustine's private hospital. He's conscious. The doctors say it's not life-threatening, but you should come." The world tilted on its axis. An accident. How is he okay? A fender bender that got a bit more serious. A minor concussion. Some bruises, they said. They just want to keep him for observation. He's in the Beaumont Wing Suite, 402. Relief sharp and dizzying, warred with the panic. Not life-threatening. He was conscious. She could breathe. But the image of Marcus, her strong, invincible Marcus, lying in a hospital bed, was an affront to the natural order of her world. "I'm on my way," she said, her voice firmer than she felt. She didn't even bother changing out of her cashmere lounge set. She grabbed her purse, her keys, and summoned the elevator, her hand resting protectively on her swollen abdomen. The baby shifted a gentle roll that was usually a comfort, but now felt like a shared tremor of anxiety. The drive through the city was a blur of horns and traffic lights that seemed to mock her urgency. Their driver, Robert, navigated the chaos with his usual stoic calm. His eyes occasionally flicking to her in the rearview mirror, a silent offer of support. St. Augustine's was less a hospital and more a luxury hotel where medical procedures happened to take place. The lobby was all marble and hushed tones, the air scented with something clean and vaguely floral. The Beaumont Wing was even more exclusive. A private nurse at the reception desk smiled kindly at her. "Mrs. Thorne, we've been expecting you. Mr. Thorne is resting comfortably in Suite 402. He has a visitor with him at the moment, one of his business associates who was nearby, but please go right in." A business associate. Of course, even after an accident, Marcus was probably trying to close his deal from a hospital bed. A wave of profound love and exasperation washed over her. That was her husband, always working, always providing. She walked down the plushly carpeted hallway, the silence broken only by the soft thud of her own heart. The door to Suite 402 was slightly ajar. She could hear voices from within Marcus's deep, familiar timbre and a woman's lower, huskier laugh. Smiling to herself, anticipating the relief of seeing him safe, Chloe pushed the door open. And the world didn't just tilt, it shattered. Marcus was sitting up in the hospital bed, a pristine white bandage wrapped around his head. He looked far from pained. In fact, he looked relaxed, happy even, and perched on the edge of his bed, her hand resting intimately on his thigh, was a woman Chloe had never seen before. She was stunning in a severe corporate way, a sharp, dark bob blood-red lipstick and a tailored navy blue dress that clung to her lean frame. She was leaning in close, her face inches from his. They weren't talking business. So then I told the board that if they couldn't see the value, they were more short-sighted than my ex-husband, the woman was saying, a smirk playing on her lips. Marcus chuckled, a low, intimate sound that twisted a knife in Chloe's gut. He reached up and tucked a stray strand of her dark hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her cheek. "You're a shark, Scarlett." That's why I like you. And you, Marcus Thorne, Scarlett murmured, her voice dropping to a seductive purr as she leaned in even closer, her lips almost touching his, are a terrible patient, but a very, very tempting one. Chloe stood frozen in the doorway, the handle of her purse digging into her palm. The air left her lungs in a silent, painful rush. This wasn't a business meeting. This was an assignation. The sterile hospital room, the scent of antiseptic, the very fact of his accident. It was all a backdrop to their private, sordid play. Her carefully constructed fairy tale, the gilded cage she had so willingly inhabited, crumbled into dust around her, revealing the ugly, rotten truth it had been built to conceal. The only sound she was aware of was the frantic, panicked beat of her own broken heart. For a long, suspended moment, Chloe was convinced she was hallucinating. It had to be the stress, the shock of the news. Her mind was playing a cruel trick, projecting her deepest, most unspoken fears into reality. But the scene before her didn't flicker or fade. It remained stark and obscene in the soft lighting of the hospital suite. Marcus's hand was still on the woman's face. The woman, Scarlett, was still poised to kiss him. The intimacy between them was a physical force, an invisible current that sucked all the air out of the room, leaving Chloe gasping. It was Scarlett who saw her first. Her eyes, a cool, calculating shade of grey, flicked over to the doorway. There was no shock in them, no guilt, just a flicker of annoyance, as if Chloe were a waitress who had brought the wrong order. She didn't move away from Marcus. Instead, she let her fingers trail down his arm in a slow, possessive gesture before she finally sat back, creating a sliver of space. Marcus followed her gaze. When his eyes landed on Chloe, panic finally flared, but it was the panic of a man caught, not the concern of a husband for his distraught wife. He snatched his hand back as if burned. "Chloe, darling, what are you doing here?" He stammered, his face paling slightly beneath the tan. The question was so absurd, so utterly disconnected from the reality of the situation that it broke Chloe's paralysis. A sound, half sob, half laugh escaped her lips. "What am I doing here?" she repeated, her voice a raw whisper. "Peter called me. He told me you were in an accident. He told me you were hurt." Her eyes, wide and pleading, darted from Marcus to the woman on the bed. Who was she? Why was she touching him like that? The questions swirled in her head, a vortex of confusion and pain. Marcus swung his legs over the side of the bed, wincing slightly, a gesture that now seemed utterly theatrical. "Darling, it's not what it looks like. This is Scarlett Dubois. She's my associate from Cybercore. The deal, remember? Her car was right behind mine in the pile-up. She was just checking on me." The lie was so blatant, so insulting in its simplicity, that it was like a slap in the face. Scarlett Dubois, the name registered vaguely from Marcus's late-night calls. The rival company. Scarlett stood up, smoothing down her impeccable dress. She offered Chloe a thin, dismissive smile. "Your husband is a very lucky man, Mrs. Thorne. It looked much worse than it was. I was just making sure he was comfortable until his family arrived." Her tone was smooth as silk, but her eyes held a glint of victory. She wasn't just a business associate. She was a rival, and Chloe had the sinking feeling that the competition wasn't just for a corporate merger. "Comfortable." Chloe's voice trembled, but a cold, hard anger was beginning to solidify beneath the shock. "Is that what you call it? It looked like you were about to perform mouth-to-mouth resuscitation on a man who was perfectly capable of breathing on his own." Marcus's face darkened. Chloe, that's enough. You're overwrought. It's the hormones. You shouldn't be getting so stressed in your condition. The gaslighting was instantaneous and absolute. He was turning it on her. Her pregnancy, the very symbol of their supposed love and commitment, was now being used as a weapon to invalidate her reality. He was painting her as the hysterical, hormonal wife, unable to correctly interpret the scene she had just witnessed with her own two eyes. "Don't you dare," she breathed, taking a half step into the room. "Don't you dare blame this on me or our baby." Scarlett picked up her designer handbag from a chair. "I can see this is a private family moment, she said, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "Marcus, I'll email you the revised term sheet. Do try to get some rest." She walked towards the door, pausing as she passed Chloe. She leaned in her voice, a venomous whisper meant only for Chloe's ears. "He needs a partner, not a porcelain doll. Try to remember that." And then she was gone, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and devastation in her wake. The silence in the room was deafening. Chloe stared at Marcus, seeing him clearly for the first time. The charming smile, the concerned eyes, it was all a mask. Behind it was a stranger, a man capable of breathtaking cruelty and deceit. "Chloe, listen to me," he began, his voice softening into the persuasive, gentle tone he always used when he wanted something. "You're blowing this completely out of proportion. Scarlett is aggressive. That's her style. It's business. You walked in at an awkward moment, that's all." "An awkward moment, she asked, her voice dangerously calm. "You were about to kiss her, Marcus, in a hospital bed, after lying to me about being hurt." "I wasn't lying. I was in an accident," he insisted, pointing to the bandage on his head, as if it were irrefutable proof of his innocence. "And I wasn't about to kiss her. It was a trick of the angle. My God, Chloe, after everything we have, you'd really believe I'd throw it all away." He was good. He was so good at it. For a terrifying second, she almost believed him. The desire to go back to the way things were, to erase the last 10 minutes, was a powerful, seductive pull. It would be so much easier to accept his version of reality, to be the hormonal, overwrought wife who had simply misunderstood. But the image of Scarlett's triumphant smirk, the memory of her possessive touch on his arm, was burned into her mind. "Everything we have," she echoed hollowly. "What do we have, Marcus? A beautiful apartment, a trust fund for our daughter. Do we have honesty? Do we have fidelity?" She backed out of the room, her hand pressed against her stomach as a sharp, cramping pain seized her. Panic, real and visceral, shot through her. The baby. "Chloe, wait," Marcus called, getting out of the bed and coming after her. "Don't walk away from me. We need to talk about this." "No," she said, holding up a hand to stop him. She couldn't bear for him to touch her. "You need to stay here and recover from your accident." The word dripped with sarcasm. "I need to go. I need to think." She turned and fled, walking as fast as her pregnant body would allow down the pristine, silent hallway. She didn't look back. She could feel his eyes on her, but she didn't care. The gilded cage had sprung open, and she was stumbling out into a cold, terrifying new world. She didn't go home. The penthouse felt tainted, a stage for a play in which she had been the unwitting fool. Instead, she directed the driver to a modest brownstone building in a quieter part of the city. She climbed the 3 flights of stairs on weary legs, the cramp in her belly slowly subsiding, replaced by a deep, bone-aching exhaustion. She knocked on the door of apartment 3B. It was opened by her best friend, Jessica, a sharp, witty journalist who had been her maid of honor and her anchor through the dizzying transition into the world of the Thorns. One look at Chloe's face was all it took. Jessica's welcoming smile dissolved into a mask of alarm. "Chloe, oh my God, what's wrong? Is it the baby?" Chloe shook her head, and then the dam broke. The tears she had been holding back since the hospital finally came hot and unstoppable. She collapsed into her friend's arms, her body shaking with silent, racking sobs. "It's Marcus," she cried into Jessica's shoulder. "It's all a lie. Everything is a lie." Jessica guided her inside to the small, cluttered, welcoming living room, sat her down on the worn velvet sofa, and wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. She didn't press for details. She just held her friend, letting her cry until the tears ran dry, leaving behind the cold, hard certainty that her life as she knew it was over. The unraveling had just begun. The next 48 hours passed in a surreal grey haze. Chloe stayed with Jessica, cocooned in the comforting chaos of her friend's apartment, a world away from the sterile perfection of her penthouse. She slept fitfully on the sofa, waking up with a jolt each time the image from the hospital room replaying in her mind like a looped horror film. Marcus had called. A lot. His name flashed on her phone screen, relentlessly followed by a barrage of texts. "Chloe, please come home. We can work this out. I love you. You're my whole world. Don't let that woman ruin what we have. It was nothing. I'm being discharged. I'm coming to find you." She ignored them all, the words turning to ash on the screen. Each message felt like another layer of manipulation, another attempt to pull her back into the narrative he controlled. "What are you going to do?" Jessica asked gently on the second morning, placing a mug of decaf coffee on the table beside her. Jessica, with her reporter's instincts, had listened to the whole story without interruption, her expression hardening with each detail. "I don't know," Chloe admitted, her voice hoarse. "Part of me wants to pack a bag and disappear. The other part wants to understand. Understand what? That your millionaire husband is a cheating scumbag. I think we've established that," Jessica said, her tone sharp with protective anger. "No, it's more than that," Chloe mused, staring into her mug. "That woman, Scarlett Dubois, he said she was from Cybercore, the company he's trying to acquire. The way she looked at me, it wasn't just a mistress looking at a wife. It felt professional, like she'd won a prize." Jessica's journalistic curiosity was piqued. She sat down opposite Chloe, pulling her laptop onto her lap. "Scarlett Dubois," she murmured, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "Let's see what the great and powerful internet has to say about her." For the next hour, they fell down a digital rabbit hole. Scarlett Dubois was not just an associate from Cybercore. She was their executive vice president of strategy. A notoriously brilliant and ruthless negotiator, she was known on Wall Street as the Shark. There were articles praising her aggressive takeover strategies and profiles detailing her meteoric rise. She was unmarried, fiercely private, and according to a Forbes profile, had a reputation for using any means necessary to achieve her objectives. "This wasn't just a fling, Chloe," Jessica said, her eyes wide as she scrolled through a financial news report. "This is a massive conflict of interest. Marcus is leading the charge for Thorn Industries to buy Cybercore. He's been in closed-door negotiations with their executive team for months, and he's sleeping with their lead strategist. He could go to jail for this. It's corporate espionage, or at the very least, insider trading." The pieces began to click into place in Chloe's mind, forming a picture far uglier than simple adultery. The late-night calls, the sudden business trips, the immense pressure he was supposedly under. It wasn't just about the merger, it was about his affair with the woman on the other side of the negotiating table. He wasn't just cheating on his wife, he was potentially betraying his own family's company. The accident, Chloe said, suddenly her blood running cold. He claimed she was in the car behind him. What if the whole thing was a setup? A setup for what? To meet. Away from the office, away from anyone who might be watching. A hospital is the perfect cover. Who would question a business rival visiting a man who was just in a car wreck? It's a compassionate excuse to have a clandestine meeting. The sheer Machiavellian brilliance of it was staggering. It was a web of deceit, so intricate and layered that she never would have suspected it. She had been living with a master manipulator, a man who operated on a level of duplicity she could barely comprehend. Just then, as if summoned by the dark turn of their thoughts, a new name flashed on Chloe's phone. An incoming call from Genevieve Thorne. Her heart leaped into her throat. Her mother-in-law. "You have to answer it," Jessica urged. "Don't let them think you're hiding. Put it on speaker." With a trembling hand, Chloe accepted the call. "Chloe," Genevieve's voice was like ice water, devoid of any warmth or greeting. "I have just spoken with my son. He is distraught. He tells me you have had a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" Chloe repeated, glancing at Jessica, who rolled her eyes in disgust. "Genevieve, I walked in on my husband with another woman." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. "Marcus has explained the situation. A colleague from a business deal. You are pregnant and emotional, and you misinterpreted the situation. While your distress is unfortunate, your reaction is causing a significant problem." "My reaction is the problem?" Chloe asked, incredulous. "Marcus is at a critical juncture with this cybercore acquisition." Genevieve continued, her voice sharp and commanding. "It is the single most important deal for this family in a decade. We cannot afford any distractions. We cannot afford a scandal. Do you understand me?" The message was clear. It wasn't about Chloe's pain, her betrayal, or the sanctity of her marriage. It was about the deal. It was about the family name. It was about business. Chloe was just a variable, a potential problem to be managed. "What do you want me to do, Genevieve?" Chloe asked, a cold calm settling over her. "Pretend it didn't happen. Go home and play the happy, supportive wife while your son carries on an affair that could ruin the company." "I want you to think about your child," Genevieve snapped back. "That child will carry the Thorne name. Its future, its legacy is tied to the success of Thorne Industries. I will not allow you or my son's foolish indiscretions to jeopardize that. Go home. Behave with the dignity befitting your position. We will handle Marcus, but you will not make this a public spectacle. Am I clear?" The call ended. Chloe stared at the phone, feeling as if she'd been doused in ice. She wasn't family. She was an asset, and a potentially volatile one. And they were circling the wagons not to protect her, but to protect the family from the consequences of Marcus's actions. She was completely and utterly alone in this fight. "Wow," Jessica breathed. "She's a piece of work. Behave with the dignity befitting your position. She's basically telling you to shut up and know your place." A knock on the door made both women jump. Jessica peered through the peephole. "It's him," she mouthed, her eyes wide. "Marcus." Chloe's stomach clenched. She wasn't ready to face him. Not yet. "Don't answer it," she whispered. They sat in silence, listening to the heavy, insistent knocking. Then his voice muffled through the wood. "Chloe, I know you're in there. Jessica, let me in. I just want to talk to my wife." The knocking grew louder, more frantic. It was the sound of a desperate man, a man whose carefully controlled world was slipping from his grasp. But Chloe didn't hear desperation. She heard entitlement. He wasn't there to apologize. He was there to reclaim what he saw as his property. A new feeling began to bloom in Chloe's chest, pushing past the pain and the fear. It was a cold, hard, unfamiliar feeling rage. They thought she was a porcelain doll, a hormonal, hysterical woman to be managed and placated. They thought she would quietly fold and do as she was told to protect their precious name. They were about to find out just how wrong they were. "Jess," she said, her voice low and steady as the knocking finally stopped and faded into footsteps retreating down the stairs. "Do you know a good lawyer, not a family lawyer? A shark?" Jessica looked at her friend, saw the new steely glint in her eyes, and a slow, fierce smile spread across her face. "Oh, I know the best shark in the city." Alistair Finch's office was not what Chloe had expected. She had pictured a sleek, modern space of glass and steel reflecting the cutthroat nature of his reputation. Instead, she found herself in a room that felt more like a university professor's study. The walls were lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, groaning under the weight of leather-bound legal texts. The air smelled of old paper lemon polish and strong coffee. Alistair Finch himself was similarly unassuming. A man in his late 50s with kind, intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles and a slightly rumpled tweed jacket. He wasn't a shark in appearance, but as he listened to Chloe's story, she saw the keen, analytical mind working behind the gentle facade. He took notes on a yellow legal pad with a fountain pen, his only interruptions being quiet, precise questions. Jessica had made the introduction, calling him the man who eviscerated my last newspaper's parent company in a wrongful termination suit and did it with such polite grace, they almost thanked him for it. When Chloe finished her story, detailing everything from the hospital room to the phone call with Genevieve Finch, set his pen down. He steepled his fingers, his gaze thoughtful. "This is a multifaceted problem, Mrs. Thorne," he said, his voice calm and measured. "We have the infidelity, which is a standard if painful marital issue, but we also have potential corporate malfeasance, which is a far more dangerous game. The Thornes will fight you not just to protect Marcus, but to protect the company from the fallout of his actions. They will try to bury you in legal fees and paint you as a vindictive gold digger." "I'm not after their money," Chloe stated firmly, her hand resting on her stomach. I want justice. He made a fool of me. His family thinks I'm a nuisance to be managed. They think I'll just go away quietly with a settlement check." "And will you?" Finch asked, his eyes searching hers. "No," Chloe said the word, feeling more certain than anything she had said in years. "I won't." A small, approving smile touched Finch's lips. "Good. Then our first step is to assess your leverage. Did you sign a prenuptial agreement?" Chloe's heart sank a little. "Yes. It was a condition of the marriage. Genevieve insisted on it. Marcus's lawyers drew it up. It was ironclad, they said. It basically states that in the event of a divorce, I walk away with a one-time payment. A generous one, but nothing compared to the Thorne fortune. I'm not entitled to any part of the company or their assets." It had been a humiliating experience sitting in a lawyer's office weeks before her wedding, essentially signing a contract that stipulated the terms of her failure. Her own father, a cautious and methodical man, had been with her. He wasn't a lawyer, but he had a shrewd mind for business. "My lawyer at the time reviewed it," Chloe continued. "He said it was standard, for a family of their wealth. There was nothing to contest. "May I see a copy?" Finch asked. Chloe pulled the document from her handbag. Jessica had retrieved it for her from the penthouse filing cabinet during a stealth mission while Marcus was out. Finch took the thick document and began to read, his eyes scanning the dense legal jargon with practiced speed. The room was silent for a long time, the only sound the rustle of pages turning. Chloe's anxiety grew with each passing minute. This was it. This document was the architecture of her powerlessness. Finch read through it once. Then he went back to the beginning and read it again, much more slowly. He paused on a section, his brow furrowed in concentration. He read it a third time, a strange, thoughtful expression on his face. "Mrs. Thorne, Chloe," he said, looking up at her over his spectacles. "This is indeed a very well-drafted document. It effectively shields the core assets of Thorne Industries and the ancestral family wealth. However, your father was a very clever man." "My father? What do you mean he's a history professor?" "Perhaps," Finch replied, a glint in his eye, "but he had your lawyer insert a clause here in Appendix B, Section 4. It's titled Compensation for Dissolution Due to Marital Misconduct. It's a nuanced version of a standard fidelity clause." "I remember that," Chloe said. "It meant the settlement amount would be higher if he cheated. My lawyer at the time said it was a small victory." "It is more than that," Finch said, tapping the page with his finger. "Most of the document focuses on Thorne Industries, the parent company. But this clause specifies something different. It states that, in the case of proven infidelity leading directly to the dissolution of the marriage, a percentage of shares from any subsidiary entity personally founded and majority controlled by Marcus Thorne would be transferred to you. Not Thorne Industries as a whole, but his personal projects." Chloe was confused. "His personal projects? What does that mean?" "He has a few passion projects, small tech startups he funded, but they're nothing financially." Finch leaned forward, a new intensity in his voice. "On its own, you are correct. It would be a modest sum, but we are not looking at it on its own. We are looking at it in the context of the Cybercore deal." "Jessica," he said, turning to her friend, "your research was invaluable. Marcus isn't just acquiring Cybercore. Thorne Industries is creating a new shell subsidiary to absorb it, a new entity that will merge their existing AI research with Cybercore's infrastructure. And according to the initial filings, who is the founder and majority stakeholder of this new subsidiary, the realization dawned on Chloe with the force of a physical blow. "Marcus," she whispered. "Precisely," Finch confirmed. "He structured the deal this way to maintain personal control, to be the king of his own new castle within the Thorne Empire. It's a vanity project on a colossal scale." Finch stood up and began to pace the room. The Thornes, in their arrogance, would have seen this clause as meaningless. Why would they care if you got a piece of one of Marcus's little hobbies? They were focused on protecting the main fortune. They never anticipated that one of those hobbies would become the linchpin of the single biggest deal in their company's recent history. Chloe felt dizzy. "So, what does this mean?" Finch stopped pacing and looked at her directly. "It means, Chloe, that you are not a victim begging for scraps. It means that if we can prove the infidelity and your eyewitness account of him with the lead negotiator of the opposing company is a very powerful start, you are not just entitled to a larger settlement. It means you are about to become a significant minority shareholder in the very company at the center of this entire web of deceit. It means you have a seat at the table. Leverage. That's what he had called it. This wasn't just leverage. It was a stick of dynamite placed directly under the foundations of Marcus and Genevieve's world. "But we need definitive proof," Finch cautioned. Something more than just your word against theirs. They will claim you misinterpreted it, that you're unstable. We need something they cannot deny. The accident, Chloe said, her mind racing. I told you I think it was staged, a way for them to meet. Exactly, Finch agreed. If we can prove that we prove collusion, we prove the affair was not just a personal failing, but an integral part of their business dealings. It makes the infidelity undeniable and exposes the entire merger as corrupt. How can we prove it? Jessica asked. I have people for that, Finch said, with a calm certainty. I work with a private investigator, a former financial crimes detective. He's discreet and exceptionally thorough. He'll look into the accident report, the drivers, the timelines. He will find the cracks. Chloe felt a surge of adrenaline of purpose. The fog of her grief was beginning to burn away, replaced by a cold, clear fire. She was no longer just a heartbroken wife. She was a player in the game, a game she had never asked to be a part of, but was now determined to win. She looked at Alistair Finch, the quiet man with the rumpled jacket and the mind like a steel trap. Do it, she said, her voice steady. Hire your investigator. Find the cracks. Let's show them what a porcelain doll can do. 1 week later, Chloe stood before the full-length mirror in the master bedroom of the penthouse she had once called home. She had returned under Alistair Finch's advisement. Go home, he'd said. Occupy the space. Do not act like a woman who has been exiled. Act like the lady of the house who is merely displeased. Marcus had been pathetically grateful for her return, misinterpreting it as a sign of her willingness to forgive. He'd tried to touch her, to embrace her, but she'd flinched away with such visceral rejection that he'd stopped, a confused and wounded look on his face. They existed in a state of cold war, living in the same opulent space, but separated by a chasm of her silence. He filled the apartment with flowers, left jewelry boxes on her pillow, made pathetic attempts at conversation. She responded with monosyllabic answers, her face a mask of detached politeness. His frustration was mounting. He was a man used to getting what he wanted, and he couldn't fix this. Today, however, the fragile truce was set to detonate. Genevieve Thorne had summoned her to an emergency family meeting at the Thorne Industries headquarters. The official reason was to discuss the future of her and Marcus's marriage and to formalize a private separation agreement. The real reason, Chloe knew, was to intimidate her into signing a non-disclosure agreement and accepting a quiet, clean exit. They were going to bring the full weight of the Thorne dynasty down on her. She was not the same woman who had fled the hospital in tears. Dressed in a simple but impeccably tailored black maternity dress that projected authority, not vulnerability, her hair pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon, she looked every bit the formidable woman they had mistakenly believed she could never be. Her only accessory was the cool resolve in her eyes. Alistair Finch met her in the lobby of the Thorne Tower, a sleek black skyscraper that stabbed at the clouds. He carried a slim leather briefcase. Are you ready? He asked, his calm demeanor a soothing balm on her frayed nerves. As I'll ever be, she replied, her hand instinctively going to her belly. The baby kicked a small, reassuring thump. We're in this together, she thought. The boardroom was on the top floor, a cavern of glass and polished mahogany with a staggering view of the city. Genevieve Thorne sat at the head of the long table, a queen upon her throne. Marcus was beside her, looking pale and anxious. Across from them sat Robert Thorne, Marcus's uncle and the company's COO, a grim-faced man who valued the bottom line above all else. Two severe-looking lawyers flanked them, their faces impassive, It was an execution squad. Genevieve did not stand when Chloe entered. "Chloe," she said, her voice brittle. "Thank you for coming. And you've brought Mr. Finch. How prudent." The word was an insult. "Mrs. Thorne," Finch greeted pleasantly, pulling out a chair for Chloe before taking the seat beside her. "We felt it was best for all parties to have representation." "Indeed," Genevieve said, her eyes like chips of flint. "Let us dispense with the pleasantries. My son has made a grave error in judgment. It is a private marital matter that you, Chloe, have unfortunately chosen to escalate. We are here to rectify that. Our lawyers have drawn up a separation agreement. It is, I believe, you will find extraordinarily generous. It will ensure that you and your child will want for nothing ever. In return, it includes a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. You will not speak of this incident to anyone ever." One of the lawyers slid a thick document across the table. It stopped inches from Chloe's hand. She didn't look at it. "We will not be signing that today," Finch said, calmly. Robert Thorne snorted. "Don't be a fool. This is the best offer you're going to get. Take it and go." "I don't think you understand the situation," Finch continued, opening his own briefcase. "Your primary concern here is not Marcus's marriage. It is the fraudulent nature of the Cybercore acquisition." A stunned silence fell over the room. Marcus shifted in his chair. "What the hell is he talking about? Our deal is sound." "Is it Marcus?" Chloe spoke for the first time, her voice clear and cold, ringing with an authority that made him flinch. "Is a deal sound when you are sleeping with the lead negotiator for the other side? That is an unsubstantiated, hysterical accusation," Genevieve snapped. "Is it?" Finch countered, pulling a thin file from his briefcase. "My investigator was quite thorough. He found it odd that the driver of the car that rear-ended Marcus, a Mr. Henderson, quit his job 2 days after the accident and was paid a severance of $50,000 by a shell corporation. A shell corporation that, after a little digging, we traced back to a holding company owned by Ms. Scarlett Dubois." Marcus went white as a sheet. Finch wasn't finished. "We also acquired security footage from the garage of Ms. Dubois's apartment building. It shows Marcus's car entering late at night on at least a dozen occasions over the past 3 months. We have hotel records from his business trips showing adjacent rooms booked under his name and hers. We have phone records detailing hundreds of calls and texts between them, many lasting late into the night. It's not an accusation, Mrs. Thorne. It is a documented fact. Marcus and Scarlett Dubois have been carrying on an affair while simultaneously negotiating a multi-billion-dollar deal." He let the information hang in the air. The Thorne lawyers exchanged uneasy glances. Robert Thorne's face was a thundercloud. "This changes nothing," Genevieve insisted, though a flicker of fear was now visible in her eyes. "It is a sordid affair, nothing more. It will be handled." "On the contrary," Finch said, "it changes everything. Because of your son's actions, this entire merger is built on a foundation of conspiracy and bad faith. If this information were to become public, say in a messy divorce proceeding, the SEC would launch an investigation that would cripple this company. Shareholder confidence would evaporate overnight. The deal would be dead, and Marcus could very well face criminal charges." Genevieve stared at her son, her expression one of pure fury. This was no longer about his infidelity. He had threatened the one thing she held sacred, the family legacy. "What do you want?" She spat her gaze, turning back to Chloe. Chloe took a deep breath. This was the moment. "It's not what I want, Genevieve. It's what I am entitled to." Finch slid her own copy of the prenuptial agreement across the table, opened to Appendix B, Section 4. As per this clauses negotiated and agreed to by your own lawyers, proof of marital misconduct triggers a transfer of assets, specifically a 20% stake in any subsidiary personally founded by Marcus. Robert Thorne grabbed the document and read it, his face growing darker with every word. He looked up, his eyes wide with dawning horror. The new AI subsidiary, the shell company for the merger. He structured it as a personal founding. He looked at Marcus with utter contempt. "You arrogant, foolish boy." Marcus looked like he was going to be sick. "It was to maintain control," he stammered. "And now you've lost it." Genevieve roared, her icy composure finally shattering. Chloe leaned forward, her voice low, but carrying across the entire room. "This is what is going to happen," she said, taking command. "First, you are going to terminate the Cybercore acquisition immediately, citing unforeseen market volatility or whatever excuse your PR team can invent. Scarlett Dubois will be out of our lives for good. Second, Marcus will be removed from his position as head of acquisitions. He can have a title and office in the basement for all I care, but he will have no decision-making power in this company. His voting rights on the board will be transferred to a blind trust managed by his uncle. And third," she continued, her gaze unwavering, "I will not trigger the clause in the prenup. I do not want to be in business with any of you. Instead, you will dissolve the agreement entirely. You will give me a clean divorce, full and sole custody of my daughter, and a settlement that reflects the magnitude of the damage and risk Marcus has caused. My lawyer has the number written down for you." Finch slid a single sheet of paper across the table. "This is blackmail," Marcus yelled, finding his voice at last. "No, Marcus," Chloe replied, her voice filled with a pity that was more insulting than any anger could have been. "This is the consequences of your actions. You made your choice in that hospital room. You chose her. You chose your lies. Now I'm making my choice. I'm choosing my daughter, and I'm choosing my freedom. You and your mother were worried about a scandal. I'm offering you the only way to avoid a catastrophe." She stood up, a queen abdicating a throne she never wanted. Alistair Finch rose with her. The Thorns sat in stunned, defeated silence. Genevieve's face was a mask of fury and grudging respect. She had underestimated the girl with no pedigree. She had mistaken quietness for weakness. It was a mistake she would not make again. "You have 24 hours to have your lawyers contact Mr. Finch with your acceptance," Chloe said. She turned and walked out of the boardroom, her head held high, not looking back. She didn't need to. The war was over, and she had won. 6 months later, the city was draped in the crisp, golden light of autumn. In a bright, airy apartment, filled not with the cold austerity of modern art, but with colorful paintings, overflowing bookshelves, and the happy clutter of a new baby, Chloe Lancaster rocked her 3-month-old daughter, Lily. The name wasn't a Thorn name. It wasn't grand or dynastic. It was simple, beautiful, and it was hers to choose. Lily gurgled in her sleep, her tiny hand wrapped around Chloe's finger. Looking at her daughter, Chloe felt a surge of love so fierce and protective it took her breath away. This tiny human was the reason for everything. The divorce had been swift and silent, just as she had dictated. The Thorn machine, for all its power, had acquiesced to every one of her demands. The number Alistair Finch had written on that sheet of paper had been astronomical enough to ensure that neither she nor Lily nor Lily's children would ever have to worry about money. But it was never about the money. It was about independence. The Cybercore deal had collapsed spectacularly. Thorn Industries released a vague statement about unfavorable market conditions, but whispers of the near disaster rippled through the financial world. Scarlett Dubois had vanished from the corporate scene, her reputation in tatters after the deal she'd staked her career on imploded at the finish line. Marcus was, as Chloe had demanded, sidelined. He still had his name and a handsome trust fund, but his power within the company was gone. He was a prince in exile within his own kingdom. He had tried to see Lily, but Chloe, through her lawyers, had made the terms clear. Supervised visits, scheduled in advance, with no family involvement. He had seen his daughter twice. The encounters were awkward and strained. He didn't know how to hold her, how to talk to her. He was a stranger to his own child. Genevieve Thorne had sent one and only one communication since that day in the boardroom. It was a heavy, cream-colored card delivered by messenger a week after Lily was born. Inside, in elegant looping script, it simply said, "She has the thorn eyes. Do not let her grow up weak." It was not an olive branch. It was a final, grudging acknowledgement of Chloe's strength. Chloe had thrown it away. Lily didn't have thorn eyes. She had her mother's eyes, kind, intelligent, and Chloe hoped resilient. Today was a significant day. Chloe adjusted Lily in her carrier, kissed her forehead, and straightened the jacket of her own business suit. She was on her way to her first board meeting. She hadn't taken a seat on the Thorn Industries board. Instead, a significant portion of her settlement had been used to establish a charitable foundation, the Lancaster Foundation for Women in the Arts. It provided grants, scholarships, and mentorship for young female artists, curators, and gallery owners, women like she used to be full of talent, but lacking the resources and connections to break into a world dominated by men and old money. She was the founder and chairwoman, and today was their inaugural board meeting. Her board was comprised of brilliant, passionate women, museum directors, successful artists, and savvy financial advisors, including a now very proud Jessica, who had taken the media relations seat. As Chloe walked into the rented conference room, a space she would soon be able to buy outright, she felt a sense of purpose that the Thorn fortune could never have given her. She hadn't just escaped a gilded cage, she had melted it down and forged it into something new, something that was entirely her own. She had taken the pain of betrayal and transformed it into power. Not the power to control a corporate empire, but the power to build, to nurture, and to create a different kind of legacy for her daughter. Looking at the expectant, smiling faces around the table, Chloe felt a profound sense of peace. The drama was over. The war was won. She had faced the millionaire dynasty and found them wanting. She had lost a fairy tale, but had found something infinitely more valuable herself. And as she called the meeting to order, her voice confident and clear, she knew this was not an ending. It was a beginning, a legacy, not of inherited wealth, but of hard-won strength. Chloe's story is a powerful reminder that the most opulent lives can hide the most painful secrets. She walked into that hospital, expecting to care for her husband, only to have her world shattered by a betrayal that was deeper and more calculated than she could have ever imagined. But this is not a story about a woman being broken. It's a story about a woman who refused to be a victim. She took her pain, her righteous anger, and the unexpected power of a single clause in a document, and she turned it into her weapon. She fought back not just for herself, but for the future of her unborn child. She didn't just survive the drama, she rewrote the ending. If Chloe's journey from a heartbroken wife to a powerful force for change resonated with you, please show your support. Hit that like button to let us know you enjoyed the story and share it with someone who loves a tale of strength and resilience. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next real-life drama. Thank you for listening.